afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, I'd just like to say thank you to Richard for that introduction and also for asking us to be part of this very prestigious event and asking us to talk about something that's very close to our hearts and something that we're very, very excited about, and that's real estate development or just development in general in the Davao region, not just Davao City, but in the Davao region as a local homegrown company that's been there for almost 70 years. One thing that we like to do is not just promote our own projects, but to talk about the region itself and what are the opportunities. I'd also like to take this opportunity just to say that our thoughts and prayers are also with the people of Marawi City and the rest of our brothers and sisters in Mindanao. So just a bit of background on the Davao region. I think most of us here know that for the last few decades, the biggest economic driver in the region has been agribusiness. Most of the major investments in the region have really been in the agribusiness space and some of the allied services attached to agribusiness. But I would say probably somewhat around the turn of the millennial or around the 2000s, there was really a shift towards new businesses. Agribusiness was, and I think it still is and will be, number one on the list. But now there were more major investments in real estate, in the BPO space, manufacturing, tourism. So it really started to propel the economy of Davao forward, kind of around year 2000. And so where is Davao today? You know, we're proud that the Davao region has been and continues to be one of the fastest growing regions in the country. For example, in 2015, the gross regional development hit about 7.9%, which surpassed the national average of 5.9%, and today it still continues to grow at over 6%. And when we look at the Davao market, we don't just look at the Davao City population, but really the whole region, which is actually not that small of a number. It's actually about 5 million. And in Davao City alone, it's about 2 million. And when we look at the whole of Mindanao, it's 20 plus million. So it's a big market. There's a lot of opportunities there. One thing also that we were happy about starting 2017 is that there's actually an energy surplus. So it's probably the first time in a very long time that most cities, at least the major cities in Davao, did not have any brownouts. So, for example, we are also in the industrial park space, and one of the questions that's always asked of us is, do you have enough power? And finally, we can say it in the affirmative that we will not have a problem. Starting next year, the outlook is that we'll have about 1,000 megawatts of excess capacity. So that'll be more than Visayas and even, I think, even Luzon. And also this year, I think ASEAN became another big buzzword, especially with the Philippines hosting the ASEAN for this year. So there's been a lot of attention on that. And when you really think about trade within the ASEAN, the Davao region is actually the most accessible in terms of connecting the Philippines to Malaysia, Indonesia, and all the other ASEAN countries. So there's a lot of opportunities. I think just last month it was highly publicized as well, but there's a new sea route connecting Indonesia, Davao, Jensan. So that's, I think, just the start of more interconnectivity in the region. And so now we're seeing a lot of growth from, as I mentioned, not just from the agribusiness space, but sectors such as BPOs. As we all know, obviously, infrastructure is big. I think Mindanao is actually going to get the lion's share of the infrastructure budget this year. And in particular, Region 11 will be getting a lion's share of that Mindanao budget. And so this will lead to investments in manufacturing, real estate, and other service sectors. But we really think that there's really more to come for the Davao region. You know, Davao City is actually one of the biggest cities in the world, not just in the country. So there is a lot of room to develop. Labor force is very big. And what's interesting, it's a very highly educated workforce. And I think that's why the BPO space has really thrived in the city. Just want to also make a point about security. Contrary to the belief that there are a lot of issues in Davao City, because I think there's that stigma that we have to deal with being in Mindanao. But Davao City has already been considered one of the safest, if not the safest, city in the country, and it continues to be today. You know, that's probably the #1 priority of our current mayor and vice mayor is really peace and order in Davao City. Again, we just mentioned about transport infrastructure. Some of the major projects that have been talked about, the Mindanao Railway. There's also a number of new roads that will be, hopefully they will start those starting this year. There's also bridges connecting Mindanao to other parts of the country. So I guess if the government can start on these projects, then we'll see a lot more investors such as yourself coming into the city. So what are the growth areas in Davao today? And I know that this is a real estate forum, but it would be worth noting some of the other investment or priority areas in the Davao region today. First and foremost, as I mentioned, is agribusiness. Even though that there's really growth in the other industries, agribusiness will still be number one. Of course, since Mindanao is really the food basket of the country, so it's inevitable that agribusiness will still be number one. But other industries now, such as tourism, for instance, we also have our own hotels, or we're partnered with other companies that are in this space. And what I can say is that there is a shortage of hotels in Davao City and also resort facilities. From about 2014 to about 2016, hotel occupancy was a very respectable, I would say, about 65 to 70%. Starting 2017, that number was closer to about 85 to 90%. And the hotels are really enjoying that by increasing their rates. And well, that's why we're hoping that more hotels will come in. I think Dusit will come in starting next year, and I'll show that in a slide later. ICT, so Davao City is actually considered a top-tier city for the BPO space, and I think that's really because labor is still cheaper than Metro Manila or in Metro Cebu, for instance. Rents are still cheaper, and the labor force is highly educated. So all of those things put together make for a very robust BPO space. In fact, 1/3 of the BPO space outside of Metro Manila is located in Davao City. Education. This is one of the hot sectors, I would say, in Davao City today. And in fact, there were 4 major schools from Metro Manila that announced that they would be putting up campuses in Davao City within the next few years. So as we speak, Mapua of the Malayan group they are constructing their new campus. Lyceum broke ground just this January for a new campus. La Salle, I think, will also be putting up a school in one of the Mega World projects. And if I'm not mistaken, the last one is Letran. PPPs, obviously, with the infrastructure projects being, I guess, really being focused on. And finally, property development. And when we talk about property development in Davao City, I guess it ranges across all the different types of real estate activities, from commercial to residential, tourism, and industrial, in industrial parks as well. So a little bit about real estate development in Davao City, and this is from our own experience. Somebody asked me earlier, are the big players already in Davao City? And so at least I can answer, the giants have come already. I think SM and Ayala historically have been in the city for quite some time, but sometime around 2009 to 2010, they really came back in a major way. SM put up their SM Lanang Premier Mall, which is a high-end mall in the city. It also has an SMX Convention Center, so it's the only one in the city today. Ayala also put up their Brisa complex, which is a mixed-use development. And a few years after that, Mega World announced a big project. It was a 15 billion multi-building project, which is also currently under construction. So when you look at the real estate space now in the city, it's really a mix of a lot of the who's who in the real estate industry here in the country, but also some local homegrown developers such as Damosa Land. And also as evidenced by the number of condos in Davao today. You know, it's really interesting. People always say, why are you building condos in Davao when there's so much space that you can build houses? But that's really the trend nowadays. Right now I guess the more urban parts of Davao City, it's all vertical development. So what's amazing here is that the CAGR from 2007 to 2016 has been an outstanding 65%. But also what's encouraging is that, according to a recent report, the inventory level of Davao City's condos is just a bit over 1 year, versus, say, Metro Manila or Cebu, which is closer to 2 to 2.5 years. So there is still room to develop. And also, not to be outdone, some of the trends in the real estate space that we see there, it mimics those of what we see in the rest of the country, so mixed-use developments. These are all by major developers. Also, green urbanism, and I think this is just fitting because Davao is also considered one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest city in the country today. And also, I mentioned a lot about the BPO space. So when you look at the list up here, again, this is kind of a who's who of the big BPO companies that are in the country today. And this continues to grow. And if I can just share at least our own data point, in our IT park, which was actually the first PESA-accredited IT park in the Davao region, we launched that in 2007. In 2010, we only had 350 employees or BPO employees in that park. Today, it's about 1,200. So every 2 years, the growth was about 52%. And I think that this is also indicative of what's really going on in the broader market today. Coworking. I think in the office space, coworking is also one of the latest trends. And so last year, Damosa Land, we partnered with Regis Business Center, which is, I think, the world leader in co-working or flexible workspace solutions. So this was in 2007, this was in August of 2016 that we established the first Regis Business Center in Mindanao. It was a risk at the time, I think, because it was also the biggest Regis Business Center in the country with about 1,600 square meters of space, 346 seats. And we projected that, I think, in 2 years, was it, AJ? In 2 years, we would hit about 80%, but we actually hit that 80% mark in only 6 months. And the demand continues to be very robust. So thank you to Regis for that partnership. So if I can just share also a little bit about our projects and our experiences in Davao. So I think the question that we had to ask ourselves was, with all of this new investment, with all of these big developers coming into Davao, how does a local homegrown developer such as Damosa Land compete? But the way we see it, it's really, how do we compete yet coexist? Because I think it's possible to do that. So one thing that we like to do is we don't just focus on one kind of real estate activity. Damosa Land is really a Mindanao growth story. So wherever we find an opportunity where we can help the economy propel forward, wherever we can create opportunities, wherever we can create jobs, that's where we like to invest. So right now, our portfolio looks like this. We have residential spaces, we have commercial spaces, we're into tourism, industrial estates, and most recently, mixed-use developments. And the common denominator here is that these are all in the Davao region, all in Mindanao. We have most of our projects in Davao City, but we also have in Davao del Norte and General Santos as well. This was our first horizontal development, and we are happy that this actually won an award last month at the Asia Property Guru Award. So we gladly accepted the award for Best Residential Development in Davao City. So this is an upscale house and lot community. And there's not many upscale house and lot communities in the city today. But what we said was, let's capitalize on the goodwill that we have, having worked in the Davao region for almost 70 years. So there was at least that goodwill between us and the market that we were selling to. This is our condo development, which we launched about 2 years ago and is currently being built right now. We have about 2 towers that have been topped off. And I think the one interesting thing here is that we put up this project it was actually in an industrial part of Davao City. So it was a bit of a risk. People thought that we were crazy for doing that, but we said, I guess we took advantage of the fact that we can act with our gut because we've been there for decades. We kind of know where the market's going. We like to think that we know the market better than anybody else. And sure enough, I mean, it's been successful so far. We've sold out about 90% of our inventory, and construction is underway. This is the project that we just inaugurated last week. This is called Agria. This is what we're calling, or what we like to consider, or we hope we can call it that, is the first agri-themed CBD project in the country. And what we did was that we wanted to stay true to the rich agricultural heritage of Davao del Norte. And so we put agriculture at the heart of this project. So for instance, we will have agri-tourism facilities. And also last week when we broke ground for this project, we also broke ground for a partnership that the Anflocor Group, which is our parent company, will have with the University of the Philippines. So we partnered with UP to put up the first UP Professional School for Agriculture and the Environment. So that's going to be housed in this project. And finally, our industrial parks. I guess, chances are, if you've been doing work or doing business for such a long time in the region, for us, we've been there, as I mentioned, almost 70 years, chances are that you'll have other businesses in the region as well. So for us, we said, let's capitalize on some of the synergies that we can have with the other companies. So for instance, we put our industrial park really within walking distance from an international container terminal, which is also part of the group's portfolio. So we're hoping, or actually we think that this will be the first and only fully operational industrial park in the Davao region. A lot of the other industrial parks, as we know, are in Luzon, and there's a number of them in the Visayas, but not so much yet in Mindanao. So again, we're I guess, throwing the first stone, and we're hoping that it will be successful. So just to wrap this up, we strongly feel that there is still room for growth in Mindanao, especially in Davao City. We've been growing quite quickly over the last decade or so, but we think that this is really just the start. I think also, obviously, with what's happening in the political space, with our president coming from Davao, that this will only help propel the city forward. Although I just like to point out, there is that misperception that Davao has really started to grow only now because of the, I guess, when President Duterte started sitting in Malacanang. But I just like to say that, the economic indicators were there in the early 2000s, and that's why there was a number of major developers that already came into the city. And now it's just going to be propelled even more forward. But this has been happening actually for quite some time. Infrastructure, if the government can really start on these major infrastructure projects, this will really bode well for any type of industry, not just real estate, in the region today. And so we feel that, there are many opportunities. We invite all of you, if you have the opportunity to invest in Mindanao, please do so. The Mindanao, and especially Davao City, has been open for business, and it continues to still be open for business today. So with that, thank you again, and good afternoon.